This is a story that has actually happened to me while snorkeling in the Caribbean. Yes, I, Sinister Grave, had a hazardous and scary encounter in paradise. So, I was in my early teenage years and I was on a series of trips around the Caribbean with a wilderness group. If anyone has ever been in a wilderness group, with awesome people, the experiences you make on those trips can be wonderful and life-changing, for the most part. So, to begin the story, I was in the Dry Tortugas, a set of islands founded off Key West, Florida in the 1500s by Ponce de Leon, which later became occupied by the Americans, and in the 1800s on Garden Key, Fort Jefferson was built. Now, Fort Jefferson dominates the island as it is a massive brick fortress with cannons positioned all over it. It is truly a sight to behold. I highly suggest visiting there. It's a beautiful island, or should I say fortress island. Now, we went there to learn about the history of the fort, but mostly to experience the aquatic life surrounding the island. On the first day we arrived, we just went kayaking and fishing. At the time, as long as you have a fishing license, you could fish, but there were certain fish that you couldn't catch, like the Goliath grouper, which was truly a menacing beast of a fish. Now, on the second day, that was when I went snorkeling around the island. I got my snorkel gear and my bathing suit and I plunged into the water. Oh man, what a beautiful sight. I mean, the clarity of the water was insanely clear. Great visibility. I could see fish until they were mere shimmering specks in the water. It was truly fantastic. But to speed things up, I was swimming by the docks because there are no people fishing or boats nearby. So I was around 6 or 8 feet underwater and I was spectating a couple red snappers and grunts between the dock pylons when I saw a dark figure underneath the shadow of the dock. And it was really dark due to the coral buildup in the barnacles. I don't know what I was thinking, but I wanted to take a closer look. I slowly swam towards the dark shadow of the dock. I had a good breath of air in, so I was good for about 30 seconds to see whatever that thing was. I slowly moved my hands to get closer and closer. I finally began to see the thing that was in front of me, and I immediately stopped. I saw 2 big brown pearlescent eyes facing right at me. The creature started to move slowly towards me. Sooner and sooner, I am able to gauge the size of this thing. And I think to myself, oh my God. As this creature came out of the shadows and into the light, that's when I saw it face to face. A 600-pound Goliath grouper. I was absolutely petrified. I kid you not, this thing freaked me out more than anything I've ever imagined. And it was the largest creature that I was ever 3 feet away from. At this point, the behemoth positioned itself to the side. His eye was fixed on me, waiting to see what my move was. And right now, I've been probably 35 seconds underwater and I'm starting to feel the fatigue set in. I know if I move too fast, the grouper may strike. I've heard stories of groupers swallowing snorkelers and divers' arms before. I did not want that to happen to me at all. So, while containing myself and yearning, and I mean yearning, to get oxygen, I told myself, fuck it. I folded my arms. I slowly positioned my legs in front of me and gently kicked. I started to back up very slowly, no sudden moves. The fish can be a real wild card. The eye of the grouper was still fixed on me. At this point, I was 40 to 50 seconds underwater. I was really straining and I needed a breath of air. I decided to take a kick that would send me out of the dock. The beast observed me, and it remained in that position, merely 10 feet away from me now. To my luck, from then on, the grouper stayed under the dock. Now, it was finally time for me to get to the surface. I was so relieved that the grouper didn't go after me, and even more relieved that I could get air. I began my ascension to the surface. I began to rise from around 6 to 8 feet, and I had my hands up in front of me to help me rise to the surface, only to feel a sharp and painful sensation on my left index finger. I raised my head slowly to see what just got me, and once again, I thought in my head, fuck. No. Oh my god, what the fuck? The surface was covered, and I mean covered, with hundreds and hundreds of Portuguese man-of-war jellyfish. I'm not exaggerating at all. This was my worst nightmare that I didn't even realize. The winds of the sea blew them in. Hundreds and hundreds of them. Blue and purple jellyfish floating on the surface of the water. Their dark purple tentacles clustered below the sail, which is a sac of air to keep them buoyant. But the part of them that almost always stings people are the long, nearly transparent tentacles that drag down below them. And those tentacles can reach numerous feet underwater, making it dangerous for people to swim below them. Now, at this point, I exhaled my breath that I was holding in because of the fatigue. I was completely shocked beyond what I felt when I saw the grouper face to face. In a radius of 20 feet, there was a colony of man-o-war. There was no way I could swim around it. I thought to myself, well, I guess I have no other option. No matter what happens, this will be very painful. I looked for the biggest opening I could that was closest to the shore. I was near the beach and the dock, but I did not want to go to the dock because of the grouper. But alas, I saw my chance, and I took it. I skimmed the bottom of the sand that was rising. I was getting closer to the beach when I felt a sting on my back. Fuck, that hurt. Oh man, I kept pressing on. I was so close to the beach, and now I had to immediately get air. I tried to move the long tentacles aside underwater with the waves from my hands. To my luck, it worked. But there was one man-of-war that wouldn't move. It was either my head that was going to get stung, or my hands. And I think we all know what choice I made. I accepted this. I already had 2 stings that I realized wasn't powerful enough to kill me. So, as I reached the surface, with my right hand out of the water, I picked up the sail of the man-of-war, and with my left, I used my left arm and the back of my hand to guide the 2 long tentacles away from my head. And finally, I emerged from the water, gasping for air. Salt water entered my mouth and I coughed, but I still had air. The sensation of breathing again was so appreciated. But it was followed by sheer horror as I looked down and saw the man-o-war's tentacle wrapped around my arm. Believe it or not, I didn't yell or scream. I couldn't. It was way too much to process. I waddled out of the water with my flippers still on, holding the man-o-war just to make sure that when I released it, none of the tentacles would fly back and sting me. Finally, I got it off and let it go. Though, I could not tell you how excruciating the pain was from that. Unlike anything, and I mean anything that I have felt before, worse than boiling water splashing onto my wrist, which is a complete understatement. This was my worst nightmare, and I was living it. My arm felt like it had been lacerated and stung by 1,000 bees, not to mention my hand, finger, and my back. However, my right hand, which held the sail, was surprisingly unscathed. Again, I looked down at my arm and hand, and it had looked like I had had red stringy vein-like marks protruding from the skin. It had almost looked like a mural of tattooed scribbly lines that had been made by a 3-year-old. I immediately ran to our tents, which was above the beach, but only my team leader was there for my group. And when she saw me running, based off of her facial expression, she saw the marks of the man of war. To my luck, we had a small bottle of vinegar for this exact scenario, as it neutralizes the stings of jellyfish. She poured it on my wounds while asking me how this happened. I told her the story. She immediately scolded me for going out there alone without a swimming buddy. But due to the amount of wounds all over my body, there wasn't enough vinegar. She poured the vinegar on my back, which had more sting marks than I thought, and even on my shoulders, which I didn't even notice due to shock. There was only 1/3 of the bottle left, and I still had to use it for my arm and my hand, including my finger. So, I dipped my finger into the small bottle and turned it upside down. The vinegar had worked for the wounds. They were substantially less painful, but still hurt. And I positioned my arm in a way that the vinegar could run down it. As the last of the vinegar flowed from the bottle, the upper part of my arm was treated, but the vinegar flowed to the under part of my wrist and showered the ground beneath me. I looked at my team leader in agonizing dismay. She cursed under her breath, which she almost never does. Then she looked at me and said, "Well, do you have to pee?" I told her in response, "Really? That's what you're gonna ask me at this very painful moment?" She laughed for a bit and then replied, "Well, since we're out of vinegar..." I thought to myself, you got to be kidding me. But I looked at her face, and at this point she was dead serious. I mean, what other options do I really have? She insisted further that I do it. I mean, she put vinegar on me and then took my wounds seriously. If she means it, I guess I would have to trust her. Well, to save you all the details, my hand survived, though it was definitely not as effective as vinegar. I was surprised that it didn't get infected. I had scars from the man of wars for a while. I mean, months, but eventually they went away. Well, looking back, I not only learned multiple valuable lessons due to curiosity and ignorance, I learned the hard way. However, this story has to make it on my top 5 list of worst nightmares that have come to reality for me. Oh, and before I finish this story, later on that night we went fishing, but I didn't actually fish because I was injured, obviously. But one of my teammates caught this 600-pound grouper that was under the dock. And it was a 4-hour-long fight with the beast, but we managed to beach it in the shallow waters of the shore and release it back. Although, when I was once again face to face with the Leviathan out of the water, it would not take its eyes off of me. Well, as promised, I made another special video after my latest one from last night. Thank you again for watching my video. Like and subscribe. And yes, This really did happen to me, and it wasn't the only scary incident that I'd encountered while being underwater.